A morning. This is the Oneness Talking Point with Melanie Brockwell. And it's not Monday for me yet. I'll be recording this early. This is only Friday. Monday, I may not have internet yet. So, in preparation, I thought I might whiz up a little video on profit, which is episodes 18 topic. I'm not sure why I'm speaking like this. Profit, it makes me think of the prophet and the prophet with an F and a PH. That's not necessarily what we're going to be talking about today, but I got an email this morning and it sparked a piece of writing. I'm just going to read it to you and then do something else. I read an email today with the subject line, "Build your dream life with imperfect action." Now, at first, that might seem like a great segue into a conversation about the obstinate attraction to wanting all your ducks in a row before you take any action at all, aka the obstacle of perfectionism. But let's reconsider what we're actually saying. When we call something imperfect, we're suggesting that there is or was a better way. We're saying that we took action that was not up to scratch. And perhaps we're even saying we could do with some improvement. Except that's not really true, is it? In oneness, where all that is all that is, we are incapable of being anything other than what we are. In any given moment, that capability changes as all that is reconfigures itself, but not as a means to a better end. All that is already perfect. So when we seem to take imperfect action, all we're really doing is judging ourselves against some expectation of what could have been if we weren't who we are, where we are, when we are, which is perfect too. Rather than dismiss our belief in imperfection, we question its truth to see if it is true in this moment, not to make ourselves wrong in the last moment. Which is why I pose the question, is that really true? Instead of stating absolutely that I know, and as a consequence, so should you, that it is so. I'll post that somewhere. Thinking Patreon, my Patreon page, for my Patreon supporters. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, energy, and money it takes to support me on that page. So I understand the nature of balance, the nature of currency, the nature of money, and the nature of profit. I think what happens for people sometimes is those natures get tangled up in our cultural conceptions of what living well is really about. So even though you may not wish either, it upon yourself or upon anyone else to become homeless because your job changed and you got less money, or, some circumstantial situationness made it incapable for you to continue having that lease or mortgage or whatever it is. The living wellness isn't attached to those circumstances. Your living wellness is independent of your circumstances. It's even in many respects independent of what we call physical health. So if you understand the nature of what is in its perfection, or you don't even have to understand it. I think it just comes down to some kind of innate comprehension that I call trust. I trust that it is perfect. If I have a headache, I know I have a headache for a reason. If I'm compelled to try and figure out that reason, I'll have that experience. If I'm not, I won't. The headache itself is sacred. The impulse and the compulsion are sacred. Everything about that moment is sacred because I trust that that is so, not because I want to impose that truth upon anyone else's experience. Whatever your interpretation and trust and knowledge about your headache is, your eviction is, that's your truth. And for me, that is sacred, for you to continue having whatever your truth is, however you articulate it, however you dismiss it or accept it. So when it comes to profit, it's not so much a conversation about whether I should or should not concern myself with or attempt to control the universe in order to get. I think the underlying conversation that we really want to have in oneness is it true for me? How does profit play a part in my cosmology, in the theories and interpretations of what is going on? What does profit mean to me, the being that I have defined? And I guess in oneness, because the being is very much undefined and constantly being revealed in this moment, unknown in the next, profit can be one thing in this moment and something in the next. There's no concreteness. There's no challenge around attempting to make it something in particular. Now, I've never really been that interested or concerned with or focused upon or stressed out about money. It's never really, I was homeless for ages, but I didn't really see it that way. It didn't register in my brain that that's what it was. I was just having my adventure. So I guess it's a different prospect from my cosmology, the perspective that I live my life from, the truth that makes sense to me without having to think about it. It's not a logic that I impose upon what's happening. It's the experience that I'm having. I haven't really met that many people who share that kind of cosmology, who have that kind of natural experience of life. A lot of people feel like money is this thing and that profit and control over your circumstances are important. They give you a sense of safety. I've never needed control to feel safe. So my sense of money isn't, it's included in my conversation, but it's not included as one of those vital needs that if I don't have it a particular way, then my whole universe is out of balance. And I need to fix that before I can feel comfortable, if that makes sense. So that's not how it works for me. But I think a lot of the people that I talk to, that's the way it makes sense to them. And if that's the way it makes sense to you, then I guess this conversation is about accepting, acknowledging, coming to terms with questioning only so much as to become aware of, not questioning as in judging it right or wrong, unless you feel compelled, impelled, inspired to judge it so, because that would always also be your truth, and I would never dissuade you from following whatever path makes sense to you. But as a oneness talking point, profit's not so much moot. Like it's not that it's insignificant and it's not a topic of conversation. I think the reason it is a topic of conversation is just thinking of a way to articulate it, is because its importance is fluid. And I think it's one of the things that's not being talked about, considered in the conversations on the planet that are called spiritual, especially spiritual businesses. Profit's not something that's considered fluid. It's not something considered sacred. So a lot of the conversations will say, if you do this, 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 and this, then the universe will reward you and you'll have profit. And if you're in this spiritual industry, even if you're not offering a spiritual product, if you're a spiritual person, there are lots of places that offer you a means to an end. The means being the steps that you need to align yourself with what the universe wants from you, and the end being profit. Now, for me, it doesn't really make sense like that. For me, there is no means to an end. There's only a commitment to the now, to the truth, to the instructions that I'm being given, which are every sensation, all of the things we call thought, all of the things we call intimations, all of the things we call compulsions and intuitions, all of the things we call neighbors, all of the things we call bills, all of the things we call webcasts. For me, they're all part of my instruction. So it never feels like there's an imperfectness. So if the tax department at the end of the year gets my statement and to them it looks like, I've made a very small profit, or if it looks to them like I've made a very large profit, it makes no difference to me the way that it makes a difference to them, and the way that it would make a difference to people who judge that means to an end process. And I'm not dissuading you from following the means to an end process of a spiritual business. I'm saying from a oneness perspective, that's not how it works. It's not important. So there are no means to an end in oneness. There's no steps that you need to take in order to get somewhere because you're already here. This is perfection. This is oneness. This is where you, as an expression of all that is. There's no sense that you're learning and being told to go somewhere else in the future and it will feel different when you get there. The wholeness of your experience is here, and you will get all the information that you need here. And sometimes that feels like no information at all here. And that's where the important sacredness is. And you can still reminisce about the past. There's no laws that says, that's it, you cannot see beyond this point, do not think about tomorrow. It's not a rule-based awareness and perception. So if you're here thinking about what you call the past, then that's what you're doing here. There's nowhere else that you can be. If you feel like you're moving into another dimension, even though in oneness there is no dimensions, then that's here. That's what you're doing here. If you feel like you're making a plan for the future so that you can make a profit, then that's what you're doing here. Sorry, touch the microphone. There's no sense that you can't do anything in particular. It's just that it doesn't make sense. Like, you don't explain that that's what you're doing. So I could follow the step-by-step means to an end spiritual business process, but I would do it from here. And my goal would be here. And my intention would be here. There would be no other way of making sense of it. So instead of believing that I was following these steps in order to make something particular happen, I would just be present to the process that I'm doing. So if I was in step 1, I would be in the presence of step 1 here, not as a means to get to my end goal, which I don't have. Maybe we should go through a process together so that that makes more sense from the oneness perspective. And then as we're going through it, you have your experience of that process and you can attach yourself to the truth that makes sense to you. So if you're in step 1, it feels like you're in step 1 and you're waiting to be in step 2, but you can also be aware of how that's where you are. So the consciousness of what you're doing is not just in what you're doing, it's that you're doing it. And there's something really beautiful in that process of doing and being aware that you're doing. So you're not analyzing yourself, you're just watching without, a need to change anything, unless as you're doing, you get instructions that that's what you would like to do. But the purpose of knowing that you're doing what you're doing is not to change it. The purpose of knowing that you're doing what you're doing is just to be aware of it, in the nowness of it. And if you take that into another process or place, if you take that into, a better way to make profit, or a better way to stay balanced, or a better way to focus your energy as a powerful being, whatever language makes sense to you, then you take that awareness of what you're doing, that you're doing, what you're doing, then you take it wherever you need to take it. You take it wherever it makes sense to you. And that's what I really want these conversations and these processes to be about. They allow me to articulate something that makes sense to me without language, which is great. And it's lovely talking about all this stuff. But it's also lovely to think that someone takes it and has their own truth revealed to them, which is constantly being revealed to them, and through this conversation, just having a realization that it can be revealed through watching someone else have their process, because sometimes there's an agitation. We call it agitation. And so the agitation becomes something that we think we need to fix or change. So if I'm, watching, I don't watch the news, but if I watch the news, if I get agitated with the loaded language, that's my truth making itself aware of itself. So the agitation is a means of availing my truth. It still feels like agitation, but often the conversations we have, with gurus and counselors and, the let's balance our life for wellness, let's smooth out the agitation, that conversation wants to cut out that agitation that we're feeling. And I think one of the beautiful things about oneness is that you can meet that agitation as it is and recognize it as your truth, making itself visible. And that awareness itself obviously changes the agitation without you identifying it as a problem and going in there to remove it, which is a very different process. So there are a whole lot of truths that come out of holding that agitation as a problem and approaching it to change it or fix it or heal it or balance it or resolve it or, see it from a different perspective or whatever the answer is when you have a problem. Whereas in oneness, where everything is sacred, that agitation is recognized as part of your wholeness. So there's no categories of self that need to be shifted, delegated into buckets of good and bad and useful and not useful and obstacles over here and self-sabotage over there. You don't have any of those labels. Everything is sacred. So you allow the feeling of frustration. You go, I know this. And then you go, okay, so this is my truth revealing itself. And then you just allow that awareness to take you wherever it needs to take you. So profit for you is what? Thinking about those spiritual business processes as a means to an end, where the end is profit, means what to you now that we've had this conversation? What happens for you when you go back to them, if you're doing them at the moment, with an awareness that you're doing what you're doing? Or the agitation of looking at, it can even be your own behavior. I say the news, but it's not always something so-called outside. I will find a language for these things eventually. It can be your own behaviors that you call self-sabotage. Like what happens when you become aware that you're doing what you're doing? For example, in self-sabotage, the thing you have labeled self-sabotage. Imbalance. What happens for you when you become aware of the actions or inactions around what you have called your own imbalance? Money. A lot of processes are devoted to the relationship with, the concepts and preconceptions and emotional attachments and past life, early life, chakra related. I'm just trying to think of the different ways that it gets talked about. That it's a symbol of sexual energy, or it's a representation of how valid you feel or how worthy you think you are. It's a proxy for your beliefs about how loved you are and what you deserve. So what happens when you become aware that you have those beliefs, where that you're doing what you're doing, that you believe what you believe, that you see the world in a particular way, that you believe profit equals a better lifestyle or a less stressful reality. So not a questioning of that, not a questioning that says it's wrong or stupid or unenlightened. You shouldn't be attached to it. We're not judging it in that way. The awareness really is just what happens when you become aware that that's what you're doing, that it's your truth. And then is it your truth? And just, follow yourself wherever it goes. Like, I trust you. I trust that you can follow your self-awareness. And I say wherever it goes, but I guess really for me, it's just here. But I understand for you, it feels like it takes you somewhere else. I understand that it feels like a journey. It feels like a process. It feels like it's taking you somewhere else, unlocking something for you, revealing something for you that was not revealed before so that you can know it now and learn the lessons that allow you to blah, 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 whatever it is, whatever the end is for you. I don't have an end. I don't need to learn the lessons of blah, blah, blah to get anywhere, because this is what's important, the joy and sacredness and allowing of this, whatever this is. This is frustration. This is a headache. If this is profit or no profit, if this is internet or no internet, that's whatever this is. I'm just considering, allowing, focused, celebrating, if that's possible, this. If you have any questions, I feel like there will be few tears, few questions, few comments. You know how to contact me in the Mystery of Mastery, which is free if you're not in there already. And I love you very much. And I'll talk to you next week. Ready? I'm going to press stop.